Hi, this is Francis Sideco with my colleague Jim McGregor. We just got back from CES 2026, and there was a lot definitely to discuss across the board. But this particular, and we're going to have some follow-up pieces around everything that we saw there. But this particular piece, we're going to be discussing specifically AMD and Nvidia. And comparing and contrasting the two companies and some of the announcements that they made. So Jim, without further ado, why don't I just go ahead and check with you. What were your thoughts, just I guess first blush, between the two companies?
Well, I think the two companies really set the tone for CES, and the fact that this year's CES wasn't necessarily, and yes, there were millions of different consumer products there, but really the interest was in, I think, both the industrial edge, especially robotics, and the data center, and how these two things are enabling enabling AI from the edge to the cloud. And AMD and Nvidia, more than anything, they did talk about PCs and stuff like that. But for the most part, it was about, what they're both doing in the data center and what they're both doing, to enable the edge,
Yeah.
especially robotics.
It was interesting that not both companies, but also a lot of other companies at CES were talking about robotics, but specifically with NVIDIA and AMD, while they were both talking about robotics, they kind of talked about it in two different ways. Do you want to comment on that a little bit?
Well, obviously, NVIDIA already has 10 plus years invested in robotics with their Jetson platform and with tons of different software tools and platforms from their Cosmos foundation model to their Isaac Sim simulation platform and everything else, even Omniverse to be able to have this integrated cloud tool set to be able to have joint development of solutions. So, from NVIDIA's standpoint, it was more about how do all these pieces come together, and kind of fit together.
Yeah,
Where I
because
think
yeah,
everyone else, AMD and a lot of the other companies, even Qualcomm, were introducing new products, new hardware products specifically for robotics, which kind of gets them into the fray.
yeah, and it is interesting that you mentioned, especially NVIDIA and their pedigree in this area, because we're talking about robotics, but it's really kind of a more general physical AI, right? You said 2025 was the year of physical AI, but I think 2026 is when it actually comes out of 2D space, out of our computers and screens, and AI goes from that to the 3D physical world. And when you look at it from that standpoint, yes, you've got robotics and you got all the different form factors, whether it's humanoid or not. But really, auto is to some degree an extension of physical AI as well, especially with the way the solutions are coming out. So one of the things that NVIDIA did come out with was Alpamayo, which is specific to auto as well. But they had a full
Yeah,
suite
another
of all of their
foundation model is
models.
specifically for auto.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was alluding to with AMD and Nvidia approaching this area in two different ways, where a lot of the focus from Nvidia had to do more with their because they had a lot of things established already, like you said, everything from Jetson and even Orin, you got Omniverse and so forth, but they really focused a lot on the models that they had.
Yes. They focused not just on the models, but the tool sets. And I think,
Yeah.
and that's what I really liked about this year's CES was it wasn't rapid fire announcements, especially by AMD and Nvidia. Both of them were crafting a story this year, especially with their keynote addresses. And I appreciate that. Being able to see how all these announcements, all these pieces of the puzzle, from the silicon to the system to the software to the tools to the foundation models to everything, how all these things fit together. And that's an important part of it. And we have to remind people that while there's a huge focus on robotics, or autonomous machines is the term I prefer, there's a huge focus on this now. You got to remember that robotics have been around, especially in manufacturing environments and stuff like that, since the 1980s. So, I mean, it's just now that we're finally being able to do things that we always envision with robotics because of AI, especially agentic AI, being able to have them think and react in a physical dynamic environment.
Yeah, it's almost like AI is almost like the Allspark from Transformers, right? I mean, like, in the movies, the Allspark, you could take any kind of electronics, the Allspark zaps it, and then
Zap.
it becomes sentient, right? And it's almost the same thing where you put AI into like you said, there's been a ton of different kinds of robots, whether they were humanoid or not. And in fact, the majority of robots up to this point have not been humanoid. But you put AI in there, and it's a whole different ball game. Before we move away from physical AI and robotics, let's talk about real quick what AMD talked about with physical AI and robotics. And they had their chips, but also they had a partnership that they announced with a robotics company, and they came out with Gene.01. And I believe the announcement had to do with using, everything from their Versal, embedded processors, all the way through, I believe Rockham as well is a lot of the software platform that they were using on that. But don't quote me on that
Sure.
bit, but definitely
But
on the embedded side.
but especially for AMD, we're seeing the true value of that acquisition of Xilinx come to play
Yeah.
here, where all that FPGA and those adaptable SoCs and all the software and everything else that they've done around those for years actually come into play.
Agreed. Agreed. So let's switch gears a little bit. You mentioned data center for both companies were also a huge focus. So let's dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, saying that there's advancements in the data centers, like saying that the sun rose this morning.
Yeah.
It is incredible what's going on. Both companies really focused on the future of the data center. NVIDIA a little bit more on their current generation, which is Vera Rubin, which are in full production of. Now, when we say full production, you have to remember it takes a long time to build the chips, the systems, and everything. I mean, we're talking, typically it's going to be about a 9 month span to be able to go from silicon all the way to a system. But they are in full production. We're expecting system deployments the second half of 2026. That includes DDR or HBM4 and all the new NVLink solutions and the co-packaged optics, everything. All those technologies that they've been working on, both for the Blackwell generation and the Vera Rubin generation, are now in production. So they focus mostly on that and all these foundation models that they're building that sit on top of it. AMD took a little bit different approach. They obviously talked about some of the announcements they made in 2025 with the Helios full system platform and their upcoming generation, the MI 450 and 455 series of accelerators. However, they went a step further and talked about their roadmap going to Yada scale computing with the MI 500, having 1,000x performance over I think a 4 year span, with the MI 400, with the MI 500. So, I mean, it's very clear that both companies continue to focus on having entire data center level platforms. Now, and they're quite a bit different. The Helios is a dual wide rack solution based on an OCP standard from Meta. While the NVIDIA solution is a single 19-inch rack solution, or complete rack of racks, or rack, I would say. But both of them definitely using the latest memory technology, the latest interconnect technology, networking technology, cooling, liquid cooling, and everything else. I mean, there's more than one way to skin a cat, but man, these systems are just incredible, and the amount of processing and capabilities they're improving. Just as an example, NVIDIA's Vera Rubin is going to be able to get 5x the training and I think about 3x, 3.5x the inference in the same rack configuration, but with twice the power consumption. So, I mean, they still managed to get in the same rack, use the same temperature cooling and everything else, but, up to 5x the performance just on training. That's a huge jump in performance. And, we're going to see similar performance jumps from, matter of fact, AMD showed some of their charts and the fact that they are definitely on an exponential trend with their accelerators for AI performance. It is just incredible. They're managing to do almost the impossible as Moore's law keeps slowing down. They're increasing performance at a rate that I don't think we've ever seen in the industry.
Well, and one thing that was interesting is, you talk about data center, you talk about physical AI, but one thing that AMD did put out actually, and I think it definitely is a response to DGX Spark, is their AI Max Plus series, which is a series of processors. I'm not sure if you even saw this because it almost seemed kind of like it wasn't as prevalent up front, but it was definitely kind of a big deal where they're touting it as PC processor for AI developers, workstation
Yeah.
level creation, but also has a AAA gaming type capabilities. So it's definitely an interesting kind of product and positioning from AMD with this type of processor.
And they're coming out with a small form factor workstation called the Ryzen AI Halo that's
Yeah,
going to be a competitor to the DGX Spark.
yeah.
So very much going, and quite honestly, I think the workstation is going to be huge for AI developers. So these small form factor solutions are going to be huge, as well as the traditional desktop or desk side workstations. Just in our analysis, we've seen that, if you've got a team of 5 engineers, you could get your payback on those solutions in as little as 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible what you can do and not have to keep going to the cloud. And especially when you're trying to work with data that's very sensitive and that you want to keep on-prem. But, even beyond that, just the ability to be able to do stuff locally instead of having to use those cloud resources is extremely, extremely valuable.
Well, that not only I think definitely it gives the power of AI development into the hands of more companies than could potentially do it. I mean, IBM, their CEO has famously said there's no way these investments are going to, do the return on investment and make money that people think at those levels, at those like Uber, hyperscale data center levels. But these workstations, whether it's DJX Sparks or some of these other workstation level machines that AMD is looking to enable, I think you're right, it is going to become very important in the next phase of AI development.
No, it is, and it is incredible. We've even worked with some startups that, they're doing most of their development, their initial
Yeah.
development on DGX Sparks. So, definitely a huge market there. But, just the fact that we're going to be bringing down the cost of doing AI both on the desktop as well as in the cloud is very, very significant.
Absolutely. So any other thoughts between AMD and Nvidia before we wrap it up?
No, I think both companies are focused not just on the hardware and the systems, but also the software. Um, AMD has made huge improvements in ROCm to where it's now available both on a Windows and a Linux system. So we're seeing the benefits of years of development there finally come to fruition. And definitely, NVIDIA made a point that said they're going to keep investing in foundation models in areas that are important to them. And it's unfortunate that they don't really get the credit they deserve. When you look at like Nemotron is already it's a foundation model that's already being used in other foundation models like Llama.
Right.
So they are definitely through Cosmos. I think Cosmos for robotics is going to be huge, as well as Alpamayo for automotive and Nemotron for large language models. I think that, just the fact that they're investing in that software foundation, those models is going to be huge. And I think that's a key differentiator. And I think we're going to see more of that from other players, including AMD, going forward. Matter of fact,
Yeah.
one of the areas that I'm still amazed where NVIDIA has such a foothold because they're the only company that really paid attention to it is industrial equipment. So I mean, they made a big announcement there with working with Caterpillar. While they've already worked with John Deere and they worked with other companies, the fact that they've paid attention to this heavy equipment for construction, for agriculture, for stuff like this, a market that really, really needs AI, especially because of the lack of labor. And they have such a strong foothold there just because they continue to invest.
Yeah. Well, AI bubble, what? I mean, clearly from
You know,
seeing,
and that's we should probably comment on that.
yeah,
Everyone keeps commenting about this AI bubble. The demand is there, hands down. No
yeah,
doubt. The demand is there, and it's going to continue to grow and expand because AI is going to be impacting every piece of electronics, every type of application that we use by the end of the decade. However, the question is when is the return on investment? Obviously, the companies that have this foundational technology are benefiting now and will continue to benefit. It's the rest of the ecosystem, I
yeah.
think, that Wall Street has to say, okay, what is the ROI for everyone and when is it? And we're not financial analysts, so we're not calling that
Yeah.
one.
Well, so CES 2026 definitely made that very clear, right? AI is here to stay. And whenever people talk about AI bubble, you always say, okay, well, I always think, what do you mean by the bubble? I think to your point, it really has to do with certain companies are probably in a more precarious position than others in terms of ROI. That doesn't mean it's going to all come crashing down like the housing market bubble or anything like that. I do believe that the primarily because it's propped up, like you said, by the demand for this capability. Now it's just going to be a matter of the specific companies that have
Yeah.
the types of solutions that are needed, and they're not all going to be all like NVIDIA at the 100 trillion billion parameter size models. A lot of them are going to be more focused models, and even smaller models that interact with each other
Yeah.
for different combined tasks. And in fact, that's what's going to be needed for physical AI and robotics. Maybe one company that might be on that bubble that could burst underneath them is somebody like an open AI, where it's difficult to understand where their business model is taking them to get that ROI. But go ahead.
Well, no, that's a very good point. The fact that, as we look at this, there is going to be AI at different levels. The mixture of experts is going to be critical, and no matter what you're trying to do with AI, because there is no single AI model that's going to do everything. You're going to be more efficient by having a mixture of experts, and you're going to have more accuracy through a mixture of experts. But also the fact that, as we look at this, that there are still limitations that we're dealing with in the market. We're dealing with the limitations in building out data centers because of real estate, because of power, because of water, because of resources, and that, and even as we look towards 2026, probably the biggest challenge AI has, no matter what you're talking at the edge or the data center, is memory. in the fact that
Yeah.
we have
It's
very
just
limited memory capacity right now.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we'll see how the memory part of the memory node of the value chain, how they're going to react to that. I mean, we talked to a few of the key players there, and a lot of people might say, "Hey, it's a great problem to have," but to them, it really isn't because they want to, they build these products to be able to disseminate them as fully as possible, and
Yes.
these memory constraints are not how. And imagine some of these companies having to make decisions between long-term partners on who they're going to be able to serve and not. It's not a great feeling, and it's not an enviable position to be in. But
Yeah.
hopefully, let's see how 2026 goes in terms of how that plays out.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Jim, for another great conversation around CES 2026. This one will be going up on with our partners at E Times with our great friend Nitin Dahad. So looking forward to talking with you more about as the year goes by.